Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so when you crack open a cold soda, juice, or really any bottled water, you're probably just thinking about, the taste. But behind that single bottle, there is a massive, highly scrutinized global operation. Today, we're popping the hood on the world's largest non-alcoholic beverage companies. We're going to break down their vertically integrated business models using the actual sustainability accounting standards they use to track their biggest vulnerabilities. It's kind of shocking what it takes to get that drink into your hand. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the vertically integrated beverage model, then look at syrup sourcing and water risks, move into bottling and packaging life cycles, touch on marketing and consumer health, and wrap up with distribution and fleet operations. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The vertically integrated beverage, owning the entire process.
To really grasp the massive scale of these global beverage brands, you've got to understand vertical integration. They aren't just like mixing recipes in a giant kitchen somewhere, right? They are colossal logistical machines. In a vertically integrated operation, a single entity controls almost the entire shebang. They're manufacturing the syrup concentrate, running the bottling plants, directing the marketing campaigns, and handling the final distribution all the way to your local grocery store. And this builds out into a rigorous 4-step farm-to-fridge pipeline. Every single drop of liquid has to survive this journey. And at each stage, the company faces absolutely massive environmental, social, and financial risks that they are actually legally obligated to measure and report. Take a look at this. This is the actual SASB accounting table. That's the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. These are the exact, rigorous metrics companies must report to their investors. So we aren't just guessing what these megacorporations care about. This cheat sheet forces them to disclose everything, from fleet fuel management to ingredient sourcing. We're going to use these exact metrics as our guide today.
Moving on to Section 2. Syrup sourcing and water risks, the upstream foundation.
So when sourcing priority ingredients, the agricultural products that make up the base of their syrups, companies have to strictly audit their Tier 1 suppliers. Those are the suppliers they transact with directly. And these audits, they aren't just a quick quality check. They are actively hunting for severe, potentially catastrophic risks. On the environmental side, they're tracking exposure to drought, climate change, and deforestation. Socially, they're heavily auditing for major nonconformances. We're talking terrible things like underage child labor, forced labor, and severe human rights violations. If a supplier fails here, it literally breaks the entire chain. Now, the crucial point here is how they manage water. We're comparing normal water usage against the huge financial and operational risks of draining resources from areas that are already facing severe water scarcity. Remember, water isn't just an ingredient for these guys, it's the absolute foundation of their products. So, beverage companies must publicly disclose not just how much water they withdraw overall, but specifically what percentage comes from regions experiencing high or extremely high baseline water stress. And what does that actually mean? Well, according to the World Resources Institute's Aqueduct tool, a region hits extremely high baseline water stress when over 80% of the available water is already being withdrawn by municipal and industrial users. 80%. If a beverage company is pumping millions of cubic meters out of an area where that much water is already spoken for, yeah, that is a massive red flag. It completely threatens their social license to operate and exposes them to sudden, crippling regulatory shutdowns. All right, Section 3, bottling and packaging life cycles, the midstream manufacturing. Once the syrup is safely sourced, we move to the massive, highly energy-intensive bottling facilities. At this stage, bottlers require colossal volumes of fresh water, and fresh water has a very strict definition here. It must have less than 1,000 parts per million of dissolved solids. Basically, it takes pristine water to make that sugary syrup. But what goes down the drain? That's an entirely different story. Bottling plants generate massive quantities of wastewater, meaning managing those effluents and strictly maintaining the temperature and quality of what they discharge is a critical operational risk. And bottling plants also consume staggering amounts of energy. This energy, strictly measured in gigajoules, is needed for heating, cooling, steam generation, and keeping those continuous assembly lines humming. Because of this massive power draw, companies are forced to meticulously track and report their reliance on the local power grid versus what percentage of their energy is coming from renewable sources like wind or solar. Just think about it. A single power outage or a sudden spike in fossil fuel costs can bring a multi-million-dollar bottling line to a screeching halt. Before that liquid can even leave the plant, it has to be packaged. Companies are tracking the weight of absolutely everything.
The bottle itself, the plastic rings, the cardboard for the six-pack, even the transport pallets. But just tracking weight isn't enough anymore. The reputational risk of plastic pollution is just way too high to ignore. So they must prove exactly how much of this packaging is made from recycled or renewable content versus virgin plastic, and what percentage is genuinely recyclable, reusable, or compostable at the end of its life.
Which brings us to Section 4, Marketing and Consumer Health, the downstream pitch. Here is the billion-dollar question. How do you responsibly market a sugary drink to the public? With global health studies definitively linking sugar-sweetened beverages to higher cholesterol, obesity, and heart disease, these companies are facing a massive financial and regulatory crisis over their advertising practices. If governments decide to step in with hefty sugar taxes or strict marketing bans, the industry's profitability takes a direct, devastating hit.
To mitigate these looming health concerns and protect their bottom line, companies are pivoting, and they're doing it aggressively. They now carefully track and report how their revenue streams are shifting. They want to show investors exactly how much money they're raking in from zero and low-calorie beverages, no added sugar options, and artificially sweetened alternatives. Basically, they have to capture these changing consumer preferences or they risk becoming obsolete. Simple as that.
But the scrutiny doesn't stop at the recipe. It extends directly into who they are talking to. These brands are heavily audited on their marketing to children. And here's a fascinating detail. For accounting purposes, a child is generally defined as age 12 and under. Companies literally have to calculate the exact percentage of their advertising impressions, whether that's on TV, mobile apps, or video games, that are seen by children, and specifically what percentage of those ads promote products that actually meet strict dietary guidelines. This intense scrutiny extends right down to the label, too. Modern consumers want to know exactly what's in their drink, right? So companies must report the revenue generated from products labeled as containing genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, and compare it against revenue from products certified as non-GMO. Misleading a consumer on a label doesn't just hurt the brand reputation. It can lead to massive civil penalties and incredibly costly corrective advertising campaigns.
Finally, Section 5, Distribution and Fleet Operations, the end of the line.
Okay, so the product is sourced, it's bottled, and it's marketed. Now it actually has to move. And you aren't just moving empty bottles. You are moving millions of hectoliters of heavy, sloshing liquid across entire continents. This incredibly heavy lift generates massive direct Scope 1 greenhouse gas emissions. And these emissions come not just from the fuel burned by the truck engines, but significantly from the transport refrigeration units needed to keep certain products cool. This reliance heavily exposes the company to global fuel price volatility and, of course, increasingly strict climate regulations. Because of this immense exposure, these vertically integrated entities are practically forced to track 100% of their fleet road kilometers traveled. 100%. They must calculate every single gigajoule of fuel consumed by vehicles they own or operate. If they don't pivot to renewable biomass fuels, a single shock to the global fossil fuel market could literally stall out their entire distribution pipeline. From the agricultural roots of the syrup, to the massive energy draw of the bottling plant, to the highly scrutinized marketing and the carbon-heavy delivery trucks, this model is an absolute marvel of modern logistics. But it's entirely dependent on cheap, abundant natural resources. So the next time you crack open a cold drink from your fridge, ask yourself, as water gets scarcer and fuel costs inevitably rise, how long can this global pipeline survive before the well runs dry? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.